We are continuing our message series on following Jesus, and we have a very clear vision for what it means to follow Jesus and how it looks. And it's centered on three things. We're learning to be with Jesus. You have the relational aspect. We're learning to be with Jesus. We're learning to become like Jesus, which is spiritual formation. And then we are learning to live like Jesus, to do what he did. And I love what Dallas Willard says about this. He says the goal is not to live like Jesus in the first century, because that was a whole nother world, whole nother context. He says the goal is to learn how to live your life today like Jesus would live it through you. How would he approach your relationships? How would he approach your job? That's the goal, the everyday, ordinary life of following Jesus. That's our vision for that. And so today specifically, we are talking about pain and suffering in life and how we should respond to pain and suffering in our lives as disciples of Jesus. If we're going to look at Jesus as our model for that. But I want to begin with a story. I remember the first time, probably one of the first times in life when I realized the world is a dangerous place. You cannot trust people. I remember this was in the early 90s, and I got to set the stage here for you. There was no smartphones. There was no cell phones. There were no flip phones, because now if you want to be cool, you get a flip phone. There was no flip phones. At that point, we didn't even have pagers or beepers. What we had was landlines, house phones. And so just to give you the picture of this, you had a phone, it was attached to the wall, and usually you had like 100-foot cord. And so if everybody was in the kitchen, you could get away from the family to have a conversation by going to like 2 rooms and pulling the cord around every corner and then finding a chair to sit in. And what was funny about this, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, they had to go through the family phone, so maybe your mom or your dad or your brother answers. Right there, that's a problem, because that's one potential step that it's not going to get to you. But they would ask for you, and so a girl called me. I was in 6th grade. And a girl called my phone line and said, "Can I talk to Brian?" And so yell my name across the house. I find the phone, and I go 2 rooms away, and I'm sitting in a chair going, what is happening? And so this girl's talking to me, and I'm enjoying this conversation, and she's really warming me up. And then she starts asking me all kinds of entrapping questions. Like, what do you think about so-and-so? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Well, do you like her? Oh, yeah, she's cool. And then the ultimate question, I should have known it was a trap. In my 44 years old wisdom, I see it. But at 6th grade, I did not see it. The next question was, do you think so-and-so's pretty? And I was like, yeah. I'd never thought about it. And so I was like, yeah. And then I hear giggling. And it wasn't the person I was talking to. It was someone else on the phone. And what I didn't know, there was a new invention called 3-way calling. And I had been set up. And so what you need to understand is this laughing wasn't like the giggle laughing, like, oh, that's so cute, Brian thinks I'm pretty. This is going to be a great future. This was like laughing at you laughing. And they were humiliating me. And so I remember the way I responded in my great maturity in 6th grade. I think I said something like, I hate you and I think you're ugly. Bye. But that was one of the first times when I was young. It was like, the world is tough. People are mean. And Jesus, he said it just so clearly. He said, in this world, you will have trouble. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I've overcome the world. What I love about Jesus, I appreciate about his approach so much, is that he does not sugarcoat the realities of life. Jesus knows with exact certainty how the story ends, that one day he's going to come back and set everything straight. All our heartbreak, all our pains, all our loneliness, all of it is going to be restored and made new. He says, take heart. I've overcome the world, and you're going to one day. But he doesn't sugarcoat the reality that until that day in this world, you will face pain and suffering in your life. until that day, you will face pain and suffering in life. And we know this is true. We each could tell stories of our pain and suffering, stories of how we've walked with people through pain and suffering. Even just in our little church community over the years, we've walked through, the daily pain and suffering of friendships when they go wrong, the loneliness of being single, bullies at school, and people being mean to one another. There's pain and suffering in that. We've walked through some major stuff, some marriage struggles and pressures that shut marriages down, the pain of divorce, and just, man, it's painful for everybody. I've sat with people where the guy's had an affair, and the woman is there, she's just full of pain, but he's in pain too because he feels the absolute shame and regret of something he can never undo, and this relationship is over. That's painful. You can't just bypass that. But we walked through the pain of sickness, the pain, so many miscarriages, of losing a little baby before they're born. It's so painful. We've walked through losing friends and seeing people lose their spouse, lose grandparents, family members to death. So we know this is true, that we're gonna face pain and suffering in the world. But you need to know that this is what, we're going to do some work today. You need to know this. And I really invite you to lean into this because this is uncomfortable. But the way you respond and the way you deal with pain and suffering has the capacity to make you or break you. It can either make you stronger, make you more full of faith and hope and joy, or it can make you absolutely bitter, make you jaded. And here's the deal. This is something you may not have been told in church, is you can be a Christian on your way to heaven. You have been sealed and sanctified in Jesus Christ and be an absolutely miserable person because you have not leaned into pain and suffering the way we're called to. And so none of us are immune to this. We have to learn how to deal with the little pains and the big pains of our life as disciples of Jesus, because that has the capacity to make us stronger or to make us bitter. And so I want to talk about the common ways people deal with their pain and suffering. There's 3 common ways. There's lots of them, but 3 I want to focus on. And I really want you to try to see yourself in these ways. You might be able to relate with one of them. You might be able to relate with all of them. But these are the most common ways that people deal with things that are hard in life. The first one is to deny the pain, to deny the reality of the pain, and to detach emotionally. This is very effective, but in the short term. And it's actually a helpful strategy in physical pain. Like yesterday when I decided to go surfing because it was warm outside, but the water was 40-something degrees. It's miserably cold. And so when I got in there, I had to tell myself, you're not a complete idiot. The water's actually not cold. It's warm outside. And just avoiding the reality to be able to enjoy surfing. I had to deny it, the reality, and disengage emotionally. That's great when we're dealing with physical pain. It's a good coping mechanism. But when you're dealing with emotional pain, it does damage to your soul. But the most common ways that we deny the reality of pain and detach emotionally is to keep moving. We stay busy. Something hard happens and then we get moving. Something hard happens and we start working. We go to our work and work more. We keep ourselves busy with house chores. We keep ourselves busy socially. We're always hanging out with people. That's great, right? It's great to be friendly and be doing stuff all the time, but we don't like being alone, so we stay busy socially. We lean into our hobbies and just really get really focused on our hobbies. And here's one that looks really good on the surface, but it can do damage to your soul because it's a coping mechanism. Is we start caring for others. We've taken care of everybody else because we don't want to deal with our own pain. I've seen this when someone dies in a family Instead of like leaning into the pain, it's like, all right, I got to start taking care of everybody and doing all the work and doing it. And there's a place for that. But it's just over functioning. Somebody goes through a terrible divorce and immediately they're just staying busy because they're not embracing what just happened. You lose a job and immediately it's, all right, there's a new one. You have a heartbreak and you start dating someone else because you don't want to sit in the pain of what you just went through. That's how we do that. We deny the pain is real and we detach from it emotionally. We show up to things, but we're not emotionally connected. And so this is one of the reasons we've been talking about different practices to help us grow in Christ. And some of the practices are really hard because the two of them are practicing silence, where you're just finding a quiet place and being silent, and practicing solitude. Some of us are allergic to silence and solitude. This is why we can't do it, because when we slow down and when we're quiet, our thought life catches up to us, and all the pain and those uncomfortable feelings catch up to us, and we have to look at them. And so silence and solitude can be incredibly difficult because it exposes the pain in our life. It's much easier just to keep moving. Stay busy. So that's one way that we like to do this, to respond to pain and suffering. The second is to drug and numb the pain. To drug and numb the pain. This works incredibly well for the short term, but it definitely doesn't fix the problem. It's a Band-Aid. But we do this with alcohol, we do it with pills, we do it with marijuana, we do it with food, we do it with Netflix. We do it with video games. We do it with social media, just scrolling. And we don't even know we're doing it. But we're just trying to just quiet down the pain of the past or the pain of something we're going through. I mean, have you ever done this with food? And it looks, you can get away with it as a Christian. If you're like drinking too much alcohol, you definitely look bad. You're smoking a big blunt, doesn't look good as a Christian. But if you got a bite of ice cream and you're with your friends and you're just on the 20th bite, and nobody's probably going to say anything. Because that could be really rude. Are you saying do I not need ice cream? So nobody's going to touch that one. But have you ever been there where you're on the 20th bite and you're like, the 20th bite doesn't do anything for you. You're just hurting yourself at that point. It's like the first or second bite gives you a little hit in your brain. You're like, woo, 20th bite is nothing. But that's how we do that. We numb it. We try to numb it. But then it's crazy when you get into like the like what's going on in your brain with this type of stuff. Like when you numb your pain, it like if you're struggling with anxiety and you're trying to quiet the anxiety and you use some of these things to numb it, it actually makes it worse the next day, which is the opposite of what we want. But then the third way we do this, and this is very important. It's very important as Christians we do this, that we address this. We spiritually bypass our pain. We spiritually bypass our way. Another way we say this is we over-spiritualize the situation. And I've done this so many times, and it is so unhelpful. And you actually do this. We do this to ourselves, but also to try to help other people because we're trying to be helpful. This is what I used to do when I was early on as a pastor, and it actually does damage when you over-spiritualize a situation. Or spiritually try to bypass the pain. And let me just clearly define it. It's using Christian truths that are true to get around, to shortcut pain. And the way we do this is when something bad happens to ourselves or to one of our friends, we want it to feel better, and so we try to go straight for joy. We go straight for joy. What is the positive situation in this? Let's hang on to that. And we don't actually acknowledge the pain. And one of the major verses we do this is with Romans 8:28. It says, we know that God works all things for the good of those he loves. And so we quote that verse after a death. We quote that verse after a divorce. We quote that verse after somebody loses their job or is going through a hard experience. We don't say, sorry, I'm so sorry this is horrible. This stinks. We go straight to the joy. I remember when a girl that I really liked broke up with me and I was probably 19 or 20, and I was suffering emotionally. And I went after church. They were like, oh, we're training counselors today. Don't ever go up to the training day. It was terrible. I went up to the training day, and the guy who was getting trained was doing all the talking. I was like, this is going to be bad. And so I was like, just like weeping about how heartbroken I was. And he didn't even quote Romans 8:28. That would have been better. He said, oh, for God loves you. He's going to work it out for the good. He just said, hey, there's so many women out there, man. I wanted a hug. I wanted some acknowledgement. And and here's the thing. What he said was true. He must have knew Lindsay was there. It was way better than what I was worried about. Even though that's true, in the moment, I need man, I'm so sorry. Sucks. Here for you, man. Needed a little compassion. I need a little acknowledgement. I mean, I've heard this and I've said things, not this bad, but similar. But you may have said these things and it's really hard. Like, it doesn't help. Like, after someone dies, and especially when it's a tragedy, we start grasping for truth. And the more truth to know, you know, the more dangerous you are. And so Romans 8:28, it's like God works all things for the good for those who loved him. His definition of good is usually different than ours. That's one thing. But after somebody dies, I had a good buddy die last year, and it was gnarly. He died from a seizure on his honeymoon. And I just hung out with him 3 months before and how excited they were for their wedding. And he died on his honeymoon. He went on a hike by himself and died. And everybody was trying to like put hope into the situation. And people would say things like, oh, God must have needed him in heaven more than we needed him. I'm like, that has no biblical basis. That sounds nice. But it's the wrong thing to say. It's just, this is horrible. Let's sit in this pain. Let's sit in this pain. And then somebody, and this could be true. It's like, well, maybe God's going to use this had to happen so that people could get saved. Like, that's also could be true, but that is not the response. When somebody just has a tragedy, you don't tell that to his new wife who is missing her husband. Romans 8:28 is incredibly true. We know the story ends that way, and sometimes the story ends up good on this earth. But my point is, we don't want to spiritually bypass the pain and suffering of the moment with big truths. See the difference there? And so that's one of the ways as Christians we do. So we deny the pain is real and detach emotionally. We try to drug and numb the pain, which works for a short period of time. And then we try to spiritually bypass or over-spiritualize situations. And we mean well, but it doesn't work. It actually makes the situation worse. All of these are ways that are simply avoiding pain and suffering in our lives. It's ways we are trying to avoid the pain and suffering in our lives. And so what's the problem with this? Because there is a great problem. I'll tell you a story. Last February, I injured my knee. And I grew up in a way that's like, just suck it up, move forward. Just push through the pain, it'll get better. And it was the dumbest way of injuring. I was doing squats. I didn't warm up. That was dumb. And I was in the freezing cold in my little shed working out. And I just heard a little click. And I was like, ooh, that wasn't good. And then it swelled up and it was bad for like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, it'll get better. And I just kept doing what I was doing. And then eventually it got worse. And so I was like, oh, I gotta go ask for help. And that was hard for me. And so I was like, I'm not going to the doctor yet, but I'm going to go to the physical therapist first. Went to the physical therapist and he had a plan. And I worked that plan for like 3-4 months. And I had a surf trip coming up. So I was like, I got to fit the healing in this plan. And it worked. I got like 95% better. I was praying. I was asking, if you were in my small groups, you were annoyed by my prayer request. Because people would be like, they're trying to help. They're like, did you go to the doctor? I'm like, no. I'm just praying. And I'm doing physical therapy. I got it under control. I need help, but not your help. Don't talk about that. I'm controlling the process. And so they were annoyed. And so we're going through this process, and it got better. And it was awesome. I got to go on my surf trip. Then fast forward to August. Happened in February. I'm like, yes, Lord, you are so good. You healed me. Feeling so good. Love Jesus. And I'm walking back across the beach one day, and I just feel it, and I was like, oh, that ain't good. And it was nothing. I took a step. And then it got worse than before. And it got to the point where I couldn't surf, and so life was over, so I decided I'm going to the doctor. And long story short, the doctor, he did MRI, and there was a real problem, had a torn meniscus, and had to get surgery, and it's fixed now. But he had to go in there and make it happen. And so the point is this, is some pains heal. But when it comes to emotional pain and suffering, it doesn't go away. And if you try to avoid it, if you try to spiritually bypass it, if you try to numb it and drug it, it will always resurface in your life in another form. You carry that baggage and those wounds with you. And so if you're single and you've been wounded and hurt, and then you want to have this awesome marriage, guess what? You're going to carry those weird responses to your pain into your marriage. And it's going to be a block for your marriage to get healthy. And that plays out in our friendships, in the way we do our work. It's like one of the reasons I figured out I'm a recovering workaholic. And like some of the reasons I was working so hard is not because I had such great integrity and I'm such a good Christian shining light. That was part of the motivation. But it was probably more so because somebody called me lazy when I was 20 years old. I'm like, I'm not lazy. I'm going to show you. Spent your whole life trying to prove to everybody else not lazy. That's how that stuff stays with you for your entire life if you avoid it. And so it doesn't work to avoid the reality of our pain and suffering. We must deal with it appropriately. And so the question today that we began with is, how do we face pain and suffering that Jesus promises us in this life as his followers? And so the best way to learn is to look to Jesus. He's our example. And he's called, Isaiah calls him the man of sorrows, the man of suffering. We sang about that today. So how did Jesus deal with pain? And Jesus is the most spiritual person to ever live. He's the most he knows more truth than anyone. How did he deal with pain and suffering in life? How did he deal with it in his own life and with others? I have 3 examples here. But the summary is that Jesus faced and embraced pain and suffering head on. Head on. He didn't avoid it. He didn't numb it. He didn't use spiritual principles to bypass it. He faced it head on, and he embraced it, and he leaned into it. Here's 3 examples. The first is when Martha and Mary's brother Lazarus died. This is in John chapter 11. And I'm just going to tell a brief part of the story, but Jesus is somewhere else with his disciples doing some ministry. And he hears that Lazarus is sick. And here's what's crazy. He intentionally delays. And he says, we're not going yet because I want to show you the glory of God. So he had this incredible, big principle, mission, and purpose. He wanted to do a miracle to show everybody. That was his intentional purpose. But then the way he handled or he responded to his friends is so amazing. So then he goes, and Martha is intense. Martha is organized. Martha is getting stuff done. So she's a little more irritable, but she comes up to him and is mad at him. If you'd have been here. And so he tells Martha what Martha needed. Everybody needs different medicine. He's basically you're going to see the glory of God. So he gave her the spiritual truth. But then Mary is sensitive and emotional and soft. And Mary is weeping along with a bunch of other people. And when Jesus comes into town, she comes up to him like a wreck, emotional wreck. And she's like, where were you? And he didn't quote Romans 8:28 yet. Or wasn't written yet. He didn't quote that. He knew it. Think about this moment. You've got he looked at her as a friend and a daughter. Jesus knows way more spiritual truth than us. We know these truths and we can use imagination, but Jesus sees the truth. He's God. And so Jesus had so much to pull from. He could have said, hey, Mary, don't worry about this. Don't worry about this. If you could see heaven, it's going to blow your mind. If you could see and experience what I've experienced, what I'm going to do for you in the future, if you could see it, you would not be crying right now. You would be so happy. He could have said that to her, but he didn't. He wept. He cried. He met her in her emotions. And he came in alongside of her in her pain. Just for a brief moment. And then he raised Lazarus from the dead, and his spiritual point was true. But Jesus is the man, how he can do all of that. But we learn from Jesus, he did not shy away. He did not try to get her to suck it up because the truth is so great. He wept with her. That is so amazing to me. So that shows us he faces the pain. He acknowledges the pain. He doesn't ignore it. The second example is even more intense. It's the garden before Jesus is crucified in Matthew 26, verse 36 through 39. It says, then Jesus went to them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee, Zebedee's sons, James and John, and because he became anguished and distressed, he told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And he went a little further and he bowed down to his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. This is a powerful story because it shows us how Jesus dealt with his own pain. Remember, he's the Son of God. He could have been super spiritual here. He could have been super tough and just be like, oh, don't worry about it. Because it said he died because of the joy set before him. He knew where he was going, but he knew what he had to do before he got to the joy. Hebrews tells us, it's talking about this moment in the garden. It's describing it in the book of Hebrews. It said Jesus wept bitter tears when he was praying to God. And so he's in this moment here. He's with his disciples. And the first thing you see is he acknowledges, he's like aware of his feelings. He was anguished and distressed. He was stressed out about what was before him. He was feeling it. And then he says, my soul is crushed. He names it, how he feels. I mean, that's a pretty complex, emotionally mature person. I'd be like, I'm mad. Like a rock, a dumb rock. Jesus is like a complex person. He's like, my soul, my depths of my soul are crushed. I'm like, I'm angry, frustrated. Sorry, we'll get there. But Jesus was aware of what was going on. And so he names how he's feeling. So then he doesn't just sit there in his pain and feel sorry for himself, because that's not the goal either. He takes his pain that he's acknowledged and he takes it to God. And here's what's so powerful about his prayer. It's attention. He says, this is what I want. Can you take this suffering away from me, this cup of suffering? Can you remove this cup of wrath, all the sins of the world being put on me? Can you remove it from me? This is a big job. It's going to stink. But he says, your will be done, not mine. That is so powerful. So Jesus models, and Jesus is our teacher and our example of how we as his disciples, as Christians, should embrace pain and suffering. He faced it, and he embraced it, and he acknowledged it. He did this by acknowledging it was real. And then he took it to God who could help him. And he asked God to help him, but then he was willing to walk in it in obedience to the Father, even though it meant going through more pain. That is our ultimate example. And I've got one more example that's not Jesus, because it would be easy to say, well, that's Jesus. He's perfect. Son of God. That's how he dealt with it. Even though Philippians does tell us he intentionally, in Philippians 2, set aside his rights and privileges as God in order to become a man. He understands what it's like to experience pain and suffering and to be betrayed by friends and all those emotions. But to give us another example in Scripture is David in Psalm 13. The Psalms, if you are hurting in life, the Psalms are a place to turn to, because it's just raw emotion, crying out to God with raw emotion, and it's a great model of how the Bible's word is, it's laments. It's crying out to God, it's suffering. And so in Psalm 13, David doesn't hold back. He's like, oh Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? Feels like forever. He's like being really honest with God. How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? He's got an ongoing battle. And he's going, God, where are you? How long will my enemies have the upper hand? He's watching this situation where his enemies are winning. How long are they going to get the upper hand? And then he says, turn and answer me, O Lord, my God. Restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. I love David because he's so emotional. Like, he's not emotionally mature. He's like, if you don't turn your face to me, I'm going to die. And God's like, you're not going to die. Even Mary wasn't like that. David was like, turn or die. Sorry. When you can see these guys as not like superhuman heroes in Scripture, they're ordinary people. Like they're like, we can relate with them, because none of us would like ever share we're that way. But do you ever feel like that in your prayers, where they're being honest with God, you're being the biggest whiny baby? Like, apparently it's encouraged, but like that's what he's doing here. Great model. But then he turns to, and there's a transformation here. So then he's restore me or I'll die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying we have defeated him. Don't let them rejoice in my downfall. And then here's the your will, not mine. But I will trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. He's acknowledged his pain. He's cried out to God, and now he's claiming Romans 8:28. God, good things are going to happen for those who love God and who he loves. He's claiming the big truths, but it starts with, this is hard. This isn't turning out like I thought. I am mad about this. God, where are you at? Where are you at? Your perspective is outside of time. You got a great view. My perspective stinks. It's like step by step in the moment, and it doesn't look good. And being honest about that. But we see this model where Jesus and David, they didn't avoid their pain. They faced and embraced their pain and suffering. But by leaning into it head on, by acknowledging their pain, and then taking it to God. That is the model for us. And so I want to give you a process of how to do this. And this is from Practicing the Way. And I just want to be honest with you about this, because I'm like fired up on this message. It's so good. It spoke to my soul so much this week. I've been working on this message for years. And I want to say, like, it is hard, especially as a man. It's like, it's hard to be in touch with your feelings. It's hard to like acknowledge the pain. For me personally, I grew up in the 90s, the best generation ever. And it was like, it was suck it up, man. Like, don't be a baby. Like, oh, your girlfriend broke up with you. There's plenty more. Go get another one. Oh, you lost your job. Suck it up. Go get another one. You're having pain? Ignore it. Dig deeper. And if you didn't do that, you got made fun of, which was good accountability. Like, if I would have brought this to my friends in the 90s, hey guys, we're going to try something new. we're going to feel our pain. We're going to name it. And then we're going to pray to Jesus like little babies. And then we're going to claim his strength. It would be like, what? So I get it. It's like we're even talking about this might be making you uncomfortable. We're getting into our emotions, but it's work. It's actually harder than going lifting a bunch of weights. This is harder because you're at risk of crying. I did this one time at a group of guys where he circled up and this professional counselor walked us through something. And I told in my arrogance, I told my buddy, we were both competitive and both like incredibly weak babies, but we acted like we were hard. And I told him, I said, this guy's not getting me. Within 5 minutes, I was and I had to learn. And I just wanted to like hide. Felt so naked. I'd rather do this all day. So it's work and it's not easy, but it's worth the work. It's worth the work so you can be emotionally healed during the time between God restoring everything and going through pain now. And so here's the process, is 4 steps. Notice your feelings. Notice your feelings. Like they start to come up, and that's when we're like, oh, the warning lights are going off. I feel sad, or I'm mad, or I'm frustrated, or I'm hurt. The warning lights are going off. We notice them. That's when you're tempted to run the opposite way. Get the drugs. Get the, that's the moment. Stop. Notice that you're having the feelings. And this, you might have to like actually try 10 minutes of solitude. That'll be it a lot. Or silence. Where you're by yourself and you're just quiet and going, what are the messages and the thoughts that are coming and haunting me right now? That's where it is. That's the work in front of you. Second thing is name your emotions. This is pretty amazing. Like it's very smart people, I learned from very smart people, that when they hook your brain up to a scanner, by simply naming the emotion you're having, it quiets the fight or flight response on the scan. Like where it's like your stress is lighting up and you name what you're feeling, it stops lighting up. It quiets it. It's powerful. And so this is a powerful exercise that actually changes you. And so for me, I didn't have a very emotional, expansive vocabulary. Mine were mad, stressed, and frustrated. Very intelligent. Like a dumb rock. And so then through all this counseling, somebody gifted me the feelings wheel. And if you don't have a feelings wheel, just find your nearest elementary school teacher, and they have one posted with all the colors. They're like, nobody taught me this when I was in 2nd grade. You might have missed it too. It's like 3 emotions. That's all we need for life. Oh yeah, there's happy. It's like, I like happy. Happy, mad. And so I'm serious. I have a PDF. If you email me, I will send it to you. I'll text it to you. I'll send it in the mail. I love it. And so the feelings wheel, you take a guy or a female, and you're looking at this thing. You're like, I'm having this feeling. I'm mad. And you look at the feelings wheel and you go, all right, mad is a surface emotion. Let's explore your feelings. And so then you start tracking it down. Well, there's options. Is your madness just another way to say you're sad? I'm not sad. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe you felt exposed and so you're mad, or maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you're heartbroken. Maybe you're anxious. And what it does is this helps you get a little deeper to some more accurate words. And then you can be like, oh, okay, yes, that person said that rude word to me and it made me sad. And so now I know I'm sad. I'm not mad. I'm sad. And so it's a very helpful tool. I'm being silly about this, but it really is powerful. And sometimes we need extra help. But you name your emotions. And then you have to, this is hard, feel your feelings. This is where you have to really lean into what's happening and go like, and let it wash over you and go, man, this hurts. I'm uncomfortable with what's going on now. And this process doesn't have to be that long. You notice them, you name them, you feel them, and then you get to work and you take them to God. You take them to God and you're honest with God. You tell him how you're feeling. I'm mad, but I'm really sad. So-and-so said something to me that made me really sad. I don't like how this turned out. You're honest with God. For me to do this, I have to journal. I have to write it down. And then be honest about what you want out of this situation. And here's the beauty of a prayer or journaling, because then you see how crazy you are in the moment. Like you're like, I'm sad, they hurt my feelings, I want them to die. And you're like, oh, I'm talking to God, probably an overreaction. I don't want them to die, I just feel that way. I want something bad to happen to them, still not a Christian reaction. Okay. I want this situation to be better, I just want to be accepted and loved. That's how the process helps you deal with these things. So we're talking to God, we're being honest about what we want. And then here's the hard part. You trust his will and commit to his way. God, this is what I want. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I want. I want this situation to be worked out. I want you to come in and heal it. I want you to fix it. I want you to bless me. But I'm going to commit to your way. I'm going to commit to your will being done, not my will. And so I'm going to love this person that I want to punch in the face. It's going to look real messy because I'm not good at it. But I'm going to commit to it, Lord, and I need your Holy Spirit to help me. That is one example. This works with the hard stuff. When you lose someone you love, when you have an unrealized dream, when you're absolutely heartbroken and lonely, you can go to God and cry out and be honest with him. And trust his will. You know what's funny about this thing? I'm just sitting here realizing this. Even like, I did a little too much humor in this, and that's like the discomfort with it. It's like I'm uncomfortable giving a presentation on notice your pain, name your pain, feel your pain, now take it to God. And so I'm making light of it. That's how like allergic we are to it. We have to lean into our pain so that the God who is able can heal us. Can heal us. And it will not happen if we ignore it, if we bypass it. And the longer you've lived, the more work there is. But it's worth it. Because I've been working on this for years now, probably like 8 years. And what happens is, through these processes, you start to feel your heart come alive in ways you hadn't felt before. Because when you deal with it with just being angry or being hard, you cut off emotions that are healthy. So God is able to help you heal, feel again, trust again, love again. Only God can do that. But you got to meet him in your pain.